Alon USA is a unique combination of retail and wholesale operations. Over 1,000 FINA-branded stores across the Southwest are backed by our refineries in Texas, Louisiana, and California. Alon-branded wholesale group supplies FINA fuel, branding, credit card processing, and marketing programs to its customers. More than 300 of these stores are owned and operated by Alon under both the 7-Eleven and FINA brand names. This gives Alon an exceptional perspective to its customers as both a supplier and retail operator. To become a FINA branded store, contact the Alon branded wholesale group today at 972-367-3600.
Steve Holtz for CSP. I'm outside one of the educational sessions at the Sigma conference in San Francisco. And joining me now is Dr. Nancy Yamaguchi of Trans Energy Research in Seattle. Now, you just did a presentation about the future of crude oil in come 2009. And one of the things that your data showed was that there's a lot of contradictions to what most Americans believe. Things like import of crude is growing, that most of our imports come from the Middle East. Why do you think some of these misconceptions continue to persist?
Partly because of the political volatility we see in the Middle East. So much of our other national attention is on the Middle East for one reason or another that we tend to equate that with their importance to our overall liquid fuel supply, and really they're not. The Middle East is about a quarter of our foreign crude imports. Other Western Hemisphere sources are around half: Canada, Mexico, Venezuela, Brazil. So the Middle East providing about a quarter of our foreign crude, and foreign crude not being the entirety of our inputs because we have our own Alaskan production, our Texas production, Louisiana Gulf, and we have other sources of liquid fuels as well, such as a growing ethanol industry. So when we look at the entire slate of products and feedstocks that go into our refining system, Middle Eastern crudes are certainly an important part of it, but they're not the most important part by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. Meanwhile, your data shows that the price of gasoline actually dropped below the price of crude per gallon. How is that possible, and what does that mean?
It certainly is possible because it happened.
Yeah, okay.
But people think that it's not quite right, and when something like that happens, it means that our crude price spiked so much for other reasons that it wasn't working in concert with the basic laws of supply and demand, which is that gasoline, after having been processed through a refining system and meeting all the specifications that the United States requires, gasoline should be more valuable, and it is more valuable. It's useful. We don't use the crude. But when we have had so much market volatility and so many people rushing to put money in one place and take it out of, put another commodity and not knowing what the future will bring, we have so much money chasing after one commodity and shifting to another commodity. And at times they're treating crude like just another commodity, but it's not really, because it's so much the lifeblood of our economic activity and growth. So we really need crude as a commodity that goes into our refining system, that we transform into our finished product, which is where the demand is. But certainly it's possible when you have a lot of market uncertainty and uncertainty about financial markets and capital and other types of commodities, precious metals, you name it. People think, well, I've got to put money here to make money for my investors or something like that. And then the markets have gone completely out of balance because the demand for crude really isn't there at $150 a barrel. And we've seen that now because we've seen that price collapse by more than half in just a few months. So clearly those fundamentals are off. And also we have the impact of stock building, where people will think, well, I need to store more, I need to store up more inventory, or now is the time for me to drain my inventory. So we've had major shifts in inventory as well. So those things have gotten out of skew, but in the long term, they do tend to correct themselves.
So where do you expect crude prices to settle in 2009, or will they settle?
We do think there certainly will be more volatility, but we don't think it can peak as high as it did this last summer. So we don't think the peak will be anywhere like $140 or $150 a barrel. But it's easy to see circumstances such as another hurricane that takes out a lot of U.S. Gulf Coast capacity. Those things happen, and it's easy to think of things like political instability in a Venezuela or the Middle East or whatever, or some sort of catastrophic loss of a pipeline, for example, that we depend upon. Any of those things can cause a price spike, but because the fundamentals of other supply and demand factors have relaxed, we don't think that the price spike would be as much as it was in the past. So we're thinking that maybe $60 to $70 a barrel basic price for crude is reasonable because it's a valuable commodity and people are accustomed to paying more of the real value of it. It's possible that the price would go below 50 if our current economic problems persist. And of course, we do expect some volatility around that range, but we don't think that the bandwidth will be $100 a barrel crude next year, and we don't think the bandwidth would be $30 or $40 a barrel either.
And at those numbers, can we expect consumer demand to return?
That's an iffy one, because consumer demand isn't just, we're finding, a function of price. It's a function of other factors in the economy. And insofar as the high prices of crude have served to weaken the economy because of the massive outflow of money for that commodity, yes, then we think that relaxation of prices is good for the American consumer. But then, of course, you have the flip side where if the price of oil is too cheap once again, and people start factoring too much cheap oil and they start getting wasteful, and we incorporate more wasteful practices in our own economy, this comes back in the long term and hits us again. So really having too cheap a price for crude is just as dangerous as having too expensive a price for crude.
It's tough to win, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much, Nancy.
Thank you.
And thank you. We'll be back with another educational report right after this.
Alon USA is a unique combination of retail and wholesale operations. Over 1,000 FINA-branded stores across the Southwest are backed by our refineries in Texas, Louisiana, and California. Alon-branded wholesale group supplies FINA fuel, branding, credit card processing, and marketing programs to its customers. More than 300 of these stores are owned and operated by Alon under both the 7-Eleven and FINA brand names. This gives Alon an exceptional perspective to its customers as both a supplier and retail operator. To become a FINA-branded store, contact the Alon branded wholesale group today at 972-367-3600.